This is LBC. Message James O'Brien on WhatsApp now on 0345 6060 973.
It's 12:34. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It happens every week. It happens every time I talk to Simon Marks. I've got a vague map in my head of things we should be aware of regarding Donald Trump, still the President of the United States of America, but I'm conscious that I will probably forget one of them or include one that is arguably less important than one of the ones that we haven't included, or that there will be something that you're very exercised by that I've managed to miss completely. Happily, Simon Marks normally manages to keep us on the straight and narrow. So, fingers crossed, and here goes. Tariffs, Simon. You put them in, you put them out, you in, out, you shake it all about. Where are we today with regard to Donald Trump's tariffs, and what happened to the Supreme Court? I thought he'd rigged it.
Yes, well, the Supreme Court is always, I think, the most fascinating instrument of government here in the United States, James, because much as it is easy for people to say, well, there are 6 Republican-appointed justices and 3 justices appointed by the Democrats, therefore the Supreme Court is going to rubber stamp everything that Donald Trump asks them to rubber stamp. That isn't the way the Supreme Court works. The justices have a duty to determine whether any specific decision that comes before them has been enacted in accordance with the American Constitution. And when you have a president of the United States who, particularly on this issue of tariffs, so flagrantly violated the American Constitution, using a piece of emergency law that says nothing whatsoever about the power of a president to impose tariffs, using that emergency law as an end run around Congress, which has constitutionally the sole power to impose and regulate tariffs, is plainly unconstitutional. So for all the fury and the vituperation coming out of the president's mouth on Friday towards particularly 2 of the 3 Republican justices who turned against him in that decision, Neil Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett, 2 justices that he appointed to the court during his first term in office, he's completely failing to understand that the court is not appointed to engage in party politics. He also, by the way, lied about Democrats on Friday. He said that Democrats on the Supreme Court, because they were Democrat appointees, well, they're always an automatic no. That's simply untrue, as he should know, because he has benefited from the fact that some Democrat appointees to the court have enraged grassroots Democratic Party supporters by siding with Donald Trump on a couple of previous issues. So where we stand now is where the markets always knew we were going to stand. And it was pointed out to me on Friday that, you know, at the stroke of 10 o'clock, as that decision emanated from the Supreme Court, eviscerating not just Donald Trump's tariffs, the key pillar of his trade policy, but the key pillar also of his foreign and national security policies, the markets didn't bat an eyelid because they'd already priced it in. In fact, the market ended the day up. There was no panic. There was no panic sell-off because they'd all priced it in. But where it leaves Donald Trump is with the central thrust of his governing policies in tatters. As you know, he's announced this 15% across-the-board tariff to try and make up for it. He can only do that for 150 days without congressional approval. And what he hasn't done at all is explain to the American public how he spent the last year saying that part of the reason for these exorbitant tariffs was to force international companies to get around those tariffs by building factories and manufacturing plants here in the United States. The New York Times is pointing out this morning that only last Tuesday, in a bid to curry favor with Donald Trump, the Japanese announced a further $36 billion of inward investment into the United States. That was on Tuesday. And then, of course, on Friday, the Supreme Court completely overturned the apple cart, which must have left the Japanese wondering why they had agreed to put $36 billion of inward investment into the United States. So this really causes him an unbelievable amount of complexity, uncertainty and distress as we are today on the eve of tomorrow night's State of the Union address.
Oh, gosh, yeah, popcorn time. It's almost as if he's a petulant man-child who doesn't know one end of a legal policy from the other, but who are we to speculate on such matters? Now, here's a strange question. Why did he announce that he was sending hospital ships to Greenland?
Well, I think for a couple of different reasons, and if everybody's missed all of this, the President of the United States in a social media posting accompanied by another one of these AI-generated graphics that he likes to put up, showing Donald Trump and the Americans in a swaggering position on this occasion towards Greenland, announced that the U.S. is sending one of its hospital ships, and remember the U.S. has two of them, the Mercy and the Comfort, to Greenland to assist in the medical treatment and evacuation of people in Greenland whom President Trump claimed are unable to access adequate medical care there. A couple of different things going on here. First of all, and I think most importantly, this was an effort by Donald Trump to remind everybody in Europe that if they think the Greenland issue has gone away, they are mistaken.
Yeah.
If Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, thought that he had successfully diverted the president's attention away from Greenland during their meetings on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos, all we've done is postpone the inevitable confrontation over Greenland that is coming. But secondly, he appears to have been irked by the fact that an American submariner needed emergency medical treatment in the waters off Greenland last week. And the Danes evacuated that member of the submarine crew. They sent a seeking helicopter out to pick him up and take him off for urgent medical treatment. And that appears to have stuck in Donald Trump's craw, the fact that the treatment couldn't be provided on board the vessel or that it didn't fall to the Americans, but the Danes thought it was appropriate on humanitarian grounds, obviously, to move in and help that member of the submarine crew. So this is all deeply psychological within Donald Trump's mind. By the way, those two hospital ships that the Americans have in their fleet, neither of them is heading to Greenland, and neither of them can, because one is undergoing maintenance at a port in Alabama.
It's up on bricks. It's up on bricks, isn't it?
Literally. In dry dock, undergoing maintenance in Alabama, having the exhaust changed, and that one won't be available until April. And the other one is undergoing maintenance that is going to take a year.
He hasn't even got a ship to send, but he's sending a manufactured AI picture of a ship. I mean, the mind actually boggles. Ron Filipowski puts it well, as you will know, the editor-in-chief of Midas News, former federal and state prosecutor, and a very interesting commentator on US politics. He switched from the Republicans to the Democrats in 2020. Thank you to Greenland for providing emergency medical care to a US sailor on board the submarine, and Filipowski is an ex-Marine himself. Since we did not have adequate resources in the area to treat him, I'm sorry that our president felt the need to cover up our shortcomings with a deranged ghost hospital ship post. On the other hand, it could be the best way for a US citizen to get free medical treatment, actually.
Well, absolutely. And also, by the way, Donald Trump never thanked the Danes for doing it, which is just so on brand for Trump, you know? Extraordinary.
And that brings us, of course, to the thing that I don't think we were joking last week, were we, that we suggested that he becomes more likely to do the worse things get for him politically, and that is to start making eyes at Iran.
Well, there's no doubt that he has moved a massive military array into the region. This is the largest assembly of American power since the war on Iraq was waged in 2003. And there is a growing sense here in Washington that he is very serious about taking what could be protracted military action against Iran. Remember that last summer, the bunker-busting attack on Iran's nuclear facilities was done and dusted, very, very quickly. It was one and done to all intents and purposes, with the Israelis also joining that attack, or the Americans joining the Israeli attack, depending on how you look at it. This looks like a much more serious potential series of military actions, and certainly there is reporting here suggesting that the president over the weekend was contemplating the possibility of enduring action in what would be seen around the world as an attempt to unseat Iran's government. Now, the Iranians keep saying that the talks with the US through third parties that have been taking place in Geneva have been going very, very well. There was a solid basis for cooperation, they claimed, late last week, not phraseology that we've heard the American side echoing. But the Iranians are certainly aware that the clock here is ticking. The talks that are underway are only about Iran's nuclear ambitions and the extent to which the Iranians are going to be allowed or not going to be allowed to enrich any uranium moving forwards. But I think that the pressure now is building not just because the clock is ticking on those talks, and the president said he'd give it another 10 to 15 days, which is sort of this sort of meaningless punt that he does from time to time, saying he'll make decisions in a couple of weeks. He may want to make decisions sooner than that. I mean, he's got such a monumental turnaround task ahead of him in that speech to Congress tomorrow night, the State of the Union address, his big night on American television. And he couldn't have a worse wind at his back with the tariffs decision, with the U-turn in Minneapolis and the withdrawal of at least some of the federal law enforcement agents that were deployed there following the killing by them of 2 American citizens on the streets in January. A whole array of data moving in the wrong direction as far as his approval ratings are concerned. He's got nothing, really, to propel him to the podium in the House of Representatives tomorrow night, and he needs a distraction. There's no question about that, and it may well be, as we were saying last week, that Iran is the most tempting distraction available to him.
And speaking of meaningless punts, Steve Witkoff, his special envoy, has gone back to claiming that Iran is a week away from having industrial-grade bomb-making material. Is everyone just glossing over the claims that were made after the attack mere months ago, that they'd wiped everything out and they were about being sent back to the Stone Age? Or well, that's not actually his catchphrase, is it? But that Iran's nuclear capabilities had been absolutely obliterated by that hugely successful mission, but now they need another mission to deal with the things that haven't been obliterated at all. Am I sounding like I'm reporting on a different age? Do we no longer remember things like that in the States?
Fact-based reporting is very much out of the window on this side of the Atlantic. But yes, this was a total obliteration, according to the President of the United States. Even at the time, there were reports that Iran's facilities hadn't been as degraded as the White House and the Pentagon were insisting, that the Iranians had successfully squirreled some of their enriched uranium away in the days before those bunker-busting bombs were launched by the United States. But the president and his Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, wouldn't hear anything of it at all. This was total obliteration, and they suggested that the media, of course, was being treacherous for daring to suggest that this had been anything other than an absolutely unmitigated success. Well, now, apparently, even President Trump's own government concedes that it wasn't the unmitigated success that they said it was, or, of course, they could just be saying it now as a pretext to take more military action against Iran because he needs a distraction. It is very Wizard of Oz over here at the moment.
Isn't it just? Well, I don't know who that makes you. Who does that make you, actually? So.
Dorothy, no question, isn't it? Dorothy with the red slippers.
It's 11:48. Simon Marks, hopefully we'll catch up with you again this week. But goodness man, well, we need to catch up with him after that State of the Union address has actually been given. But it's not funny, obviously. The laughter that you hear, Simon, and I sometimes engage in when covering these matters is the laughter of despair, truly.